the United Earth government's ultimatum crackled across subspace channels. Withdraw from contested space, or we'll ignite your worlds. Supreme Commander Jackson of the Talarian Empire stared at the holographic message, his multiple eyes blinking in disbelief. Humanity, once considered a minor nuisance, had just flexed its technological muscles on a cosmic scale. In the year 2145, Earth's scientists achieved the unthinkable. They created the Nova Catalyst, a device capable of artificially inducing supernovas in distant star systems. This groundbreaking technology transformed humanity from a fledgling spacefaring civilization into a force to be reckoned with among the stars. Timothy Simpson, the brilliant astrophysicist behind the Nova Catalyst, stood before a panel of grim-faced military leaders in a top-secret Pentagon briefing room. Holographic displays flickered with data from the recent test of their new weapon. An uninhabited star within Talarian territory had been reduced to a swirling maelstrom of plasma and radiation, sending shockwaves through the fabric of space-time and the delicate balance of galactic politics. "Dr. Simpson, you're to deliver our ultimatum personally," General Hawthorne declared, her steely gaze fixed on the scientist. "The Talarian flagship has entered the Sol system under a flag of truce. You'll meet with Supreme Commander Jackson and make our position clear." Timothy nodded, his throat dry. The weight of this responsibility threatened to crush him. He had created a tool for scientific exploration, only to see it weaponized. Now, he held the fate of two civilizations in his hands. As Timothy prepared for his diplomatic mission, United Earth military forces scrambled into action. Colony worlds fortified their defenses, and battle fleets assembled at strategic locations throughout human-controlled space. The Nova Catalyst project accelerated, with Timothy's team working tirelessly to refine the technology and identify potential targets deep in Talarian territory. News of humanity's newfound power spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Alien races, once dismissive of Earth's potential, now reassessed their stance. Some pledged support to humanity, driven by fear or the desire to align with a rising power. Others threw their lot in with the Talarians, viewing the Nova Catalyst as a threat to galactic stability. Timothy boarded the shuttle that would take him to the Talarian flagship. As the craft lifted off, he gazed down at the gleaming spires of New Washington, Earth's capital. The fate of those buildings and billions of lives now rested on his ability to convince Supreme Commander Jackson of humanity's resolve. The Talarian vessel loomed before him, a behemoth of alien engineering that dwarfed his tiny shuttle. Timothy steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. He carried with him not just an ultimatum, but the potential to reshape the balance of power in the known universe. As the airlock cycled and the doors hissed open, Timothy stepped into the alien corridor. Supreme Commander Jackson waited, flanked by guards and advisors. The Talarian leader's expression was unreadable, but the tension in the air was palpable. Timothy took a deep breath and spoke the words that would echo through history. "Supreme Commander, I come bearing a message from Earth. The choice before you is simple: withdraw or face annihilation. We possess the power to ignite your worlds, and we will not hesitate to use it." The future of humanity among the stars hung in the balance, with Timothy Simpson standing at the precipice of a conflict that would determine the course of galactic history. Supreme Commander Jackson's multifaceted eyes narrowed as he processed Timothy's words. The Talarian leader's scaled skin rippled, betraying a moment of tension before he regained his composure. "You speak boldly, human," Jackson hissed, towering over Timothy. "But words are wind. We require proof of this Nova Catalyst." Timothy nodded, activating a holographic projector. The command deck filled with a three-dimensional recreation of the recent test. Jackson and his advisors watched in stunned silence as an entire star system collapsed into a maelstrom of energy. "This was an uninhabited system within your territory," Timothy explained, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Consider it a demonstration of our capabilities and our restraint." Jackson's expression remained unreadable, but Timothy noticed the Supreme Commander's claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. After a long, tense moment, Jackson waved a dismissive hand. You have delivered your message, human. Now leave. As Talarian guards escorted Timothy back to his shuttle, he observed frenzied activity throughout the ship. Crew members rushed through corridors, and urgent communications echoed from various command stations. Timothy's unease grew with each step. Back on Earth, Timothy delivered his report to the United Earth government. General Hawthorne leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "And you say there was increased activity on the Talarian flagship?" "Yes, General," Timothy confirmed. It appeared they were preparing for immediate action. Within hours, Earth's military intelligence confirmed Timothy's suspicions. Massive troop movements were detected across Talarian space, suggesting preparation for a major offensive. The response from Earth was swift and decisive. Alarms blared across the planet as the global defense grid hummed to life. In orbit, the Earth Defense Fleet assembled, a dripping array of warships and fighters. Colonial outposts received encrypted transmissions, initiating emergency fortification protocols. Timothy found himself back in the heart of the Nova Catalyst project, surrounded by a team of haggard scientists and engineers. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data as they worked to refine the targeting system. "We need to increase precision," Timothy instructed, pointing to a simulation of a Talarian star system. "If we can control the blast radius, we can minimize civilian casualties while maximizing military impact." As Earth braced for conflict, an unexpected transmission arrived from deep space. Ambassador Krell of the Zarkonian Empire, a longtime rival of the Talarians, requested an audience with Earth's leadership. In the United Earth government's war room, Krell's hologram towered over the assembled human leaders. The ambassador's battle-scarred visage spoke of countless conflicts. "The enemy of our enemy is our friend," Krell rumbled, his translator struggling with the alien vocals. "We offer our fleet and our warriors to stand with Earth against the Talarian threat." Debate erupted among Earth's leaders. Some advocated for accepting the aid, citing the need for every possible advantage. Others warned of the dangers of becoming entangled in broader galactic politics. Before a decision could be reached, alarms blared throughout the command center. A junior officer rushed in, face pale. "Proxima Centauri research outpost is under attack. Talarian warships have opened fire." The room erupted into chaos as orders were shouted and battle plans activated. In the midst of the frenzy, General Hawthorne turned to Timothy. "Doctor, it's time. Show them we weren't bluffing." With a heavy heart, Timothy nodded and transmitted the activation codes to a Nova Catalyst device positioned near Talarian space. Moments later, sensors detected a brilliant flash as a small, uninhabited star detonated in a final warning. The Talarians' response was swift and brutal. Reports flooded in of systematic attacks on human colonies. The Earth Defense Fleet engaged in desperate holding actions, buying time for civilian evacuations. In the following days, Timothy watched with a mixture of awe and horror as the Nova Catalyst was deployed against Talarian military targets. Vast battle stations and shipyards vanished in blinding flashes of stellar fire. Yet still, the Talarian forces pressed on, seemingly willing to accept any loss to overcome humanity. As casualties mounted on both sides, Timothy threw himself into analyzing Talarian tactics and communication patterns. He pored over intercepted transmissions and battle reports, searching for any weakness they could exploit. After countless sleepless nights, Timothy burst into the war room, clutching a data pad. "I've found it," he exclaimed, pulling up a holographic display of Talarian fleet movements. "They rely on a central command node for coordinating large-scale operations. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to throw their entire military into disarray." General Hawthorne studied the display, her eyes narrowing. "And how do you propose we do that, Doctor?" Timothy took a deep breath. "We use the Nova Catalyst to trigger a precisely calculated supernova, one that will create an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to knock out their communications, but without causing civilian casualties." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the president spoke. "Very well, Dr. Simpson, but given the critical nature of this operation, we need you to oversee it personally. You'll direct the operation from a forward command post near the target star." As Timothy prepared for his dangerous mission, reports arrived of a massive Talarian fleet assembling for a final push towards Earth. He boarded the stealth ship that would take him to the forward command post, acutely aware that the fate of humanity now rested on his shoulders. The vessel slipped into faster-than-light travel, racing against time. Timothy stared out at the streaking stars, knowing that somewhere out there, the Talarian armada was bearing down on Earth. His fingers tightened around the Nova Catalyst control module as he silently vowed to do whatever it took to save his homeworld. The UES Horizon sliced through the inky void of space, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to Talarian sensors. Inside the ship's dimly lit bridge, Timothy Simpson leaned over a holographic display, his fingers dancing across the interface as he made minute adjustments to the Nova Catalyst calculations. "How's it looking, Doc?" Captain Marcus Cox asked from the helm, his eyes never leaving the navigation console. Timothy rubbed his tired eyes. "Getting there. The precision required is staggering. One miscalculation and we could vaporize half a solar system." Before Cox could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared as the Horizon sensors detected a massive debris field directly ahead. "Evasive maneuvers!" Cox barked, his hands flying over the controls. The ship lurched to port, narrowly avoiding a collision with the fractured hull of a Talarian destroyer. Timothy gripped his console, heart pounding as he took in the graveyard of ships surrounding them. Twisted metal and frozen bodies drifted past the viewports, testament to a recent and devastating battle. "Zarkonian ships," Chief Engineer Sarah Takahashi observed, her eyes scanning the wreckage. "Looks like they've been busy." For the next hour, Cox guided the Horizon through the treacherous field with unnerving precision. Timothy watched in awe as the captain threaded the needle between jagged shards of hull plating and still active weapon systems. Finally, they emerged from the debris field. In the distance, a nondescript asteroid loomed, indistinguishable from countless others in the system. As they approached, a section of the rocky surface shimmered and parted, revealing a hidden docking bay. The Horizon touched down with a gentle thud. Timothy and his team disembarked, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous facility carved into the asteroid's heart. "Welcome to Forward Command Post Sigma," a gruff voice announced. A weathered officer with close-cropped gray hair approached, extending his hand. "Colonel Hendricks, I'll be overseeing your operation here." Timothy shook the offered hand. "Dr. Simpson, we need to get the Nova Catalyst set up immediately. Where's your main reactor?" Hendricks led them through a maze of corridors to a vast chamber dominated by a pulsing energy core. Timothy's team sprang into action, unpacking equipment and interfacing with the base's systems. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Timothy lost himself in the intricate dance of numbers and energy calculations, barely registering the bustle around him. He was jolted from his focus by a string of colorful curses from Sarah Takahashi. "Problems?" Timothy asked, moving to her side. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a streak of grease. "You could say that. The reactor's output is fluctuating wildly. If we don't stabilize it, we'll never get a clean Nova Catalyst activation." Timothy's stomach clenched. "What do you need?" "Time and a miracle," Sarah muttered, diving back into the reactor's guts. As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the facility. Lieutenant James Foster burst into the chamber, his face grim. "Talarian patrol incoming. We're activating the cloaking systems now." The lights dimmed as power was diverted to the base's stealth technology. For several tense minutes, they waited in near darkness, hardly daring to breathe. Then Foster's communicator crackled to life. "Sir, we have a problem. One of the cloaking emitters is malfunctioning. If we don't fix it fast, we'll light up on their sensors like a supernova." Foster turned to Timothy, his expression grave. "I'm taking a team out to repair it manually. We'll have to work fast." Timothy nodded, keenly aware of the danger. "Go, we'll keep working on the Nova Catalyst." As Foster and his team donned their spacesuits and headed for the airlock, Timothy returned his attention to the reactor. Sarah had made progress, but the power fluctuations were still a concern. If we reroute power through the auxiliary systems, Timothy suggested, pointing to a schematic, we might be able to smooth out those spikes. Sarah's eyes lit up. That could work. Let's try it. Outside, Foster and his team worked feverishly to repair the faulty emitter. Through the base's external cameras, Timothy watched their progress, acutely aware of the Talarian patrol drawing ever closer. Inside, the reactor stabilized, its hum settling into a steady rhythm. Sarah allowed herself a small smile of triumph. Just as Foster's team finished the repairs and re-entered the airlock, the Talarian ships passed by, their sensors sweeping harmlessly over the hidden base. With the immediate crisis averted, Timothy threw himself back into the Nova Catalyst preparations. He ran simulation after simulation, fine-tuning the device to thread the needle between maximum effectiveness and minimal collateral damage. As he worked, reports trickled in from Earth. The Talarian armada had breached the outer defenses of the solar system. Mars was under heavy bombardment, and the Jovian colonies were reporting massive casualties. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Timothy like a physical force. Billions of lives depended on the success of this mission. A priority transmission cut through the tension. Ambassador Krell's scarred visage filled the main view screen, his alien features set in a grim expression. Dr. Simpson, the translator rendered Krell's gravelly voice into stilted English. We have obtained critical intelligence on the Talarian command node. Transmitting data now. Timothy's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. With this new data, he could refine the Nova Catalyst's targeting to an unprecedented degree. As he made the final adjustments, Colonel Hendricks approached, his face ashen. "Doctor, we're out of time. The first wave of the Talarian fleet has entered the inner solar system. Earth is directly in their sights." Timothy took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. This was it, the moment of truth. "Initiate Nova Catalyst activation sequence," he ordered, his voice surprisingly calm. The facility hummed with power as the device powered up. Energy readings spiked, pushing the reactor to its limits. Suddenly, alarms blared once more. Lieutenant Foster's voice crackled over the comms, tight with tension. "Multiple Talarian signatures detected. They've locked onto our power signature." "How long until they reach us?" Timothy demanded. "Minutes at most," Foster replied. Captain Cox's voice cut in. "I'm prepping the horizon for immediate evac. We need to be ready to move the moment that Nova Catalyst fires." Timothy nodded, though his eyes never left the activation sequence display. The energy buildup was approaching critical levels. In mere moments, they would trigger a supernova that would reshape the course of the war. But would it be soon enough? As the final seconds ticked down, Timothy could almost feel the Talarian ships bearing down on their position. The fate of Earth, of all humanity, hung in the balance. His finger hovered over the final activation control, every nerve in his body screaming with tension. One press, and there would be no going back. Timothy took a final, steadying breath and brought his finger down. Down on the activation control. A surge of energy coursed through the facility as the Nova Catalyst roared to life. The reactor's hum rose to a deafening crescendo, and for a moment, Timothy feared they had miscalculated. Suddenly, the facility shook violently. Alarms blared as Lieutenant Foster's voice crackled over the comms. "Talarian forces have breached the outer perimeter, activating automated defenses now." The command post's system sprang into action. Energy shields flickered to life around key structures, while automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments. The air outside filled with the distinctive whine of plasma weapons as Foster and his security team engaged the first wave of Talarian attackers. Inside, Timothy and Chief Engineer Takahashi worked feverishly to stabilize the Nova Catalyst. The activation sequence was progressing, but power fluctuations threatened to destabilize the entire process. "We're losing containment," Takahashi shouted over the din. "I need to reroute power from non-essential systems." Timothy nodded, his eyes never leaving the monitors. "Do it." Takahashi dashed to a nearby control panel, her fingers flying over the interface. Warning lights flashed as she manually diverted power, exposing herself to dangerous levels of radiation. She gritted her teeth against the pain, knowing that failure wasn't an option. Outside, the battle intensified. Captain Cox's voice came through the comms, tight with concentration. "This is Cox. I'm engaging evasive maneuvers, providing covering fire for ground forces." Through the command post's external cameras, Timothy watched as the UES Horizon danced through the void, its stealth systems confounding Talarian sensors. The ship's precision weapons lanced out, picking off Talarian assault craft with surgical precision. The Nova Catalyst's energy readings continued to climb, but not fast enough. Lieutenant Foster's voice, strained and breathless, cut through the chaos. "We can't hold them much longer. They've breached the inner defenses." Timothy's mind raced. They were out of time. He glanced at the activation sequence, then at Takahashi, who shook her head. "We need another 5 minutes." "We don't have 5 minutes," Timothy muttered. His fingers flew over the controls as he made a fateful decision. "I'm bypassing the final safety protocols. This should accelerate the process." Takahashi's eyes widened. "That's incredibly dangerous. If we lose containment—" "We don't have a choice." Timothy cut her off. He initiated the override sequence, his heart pounding in his chest. The facility shuddered as a fresh wave of explosions rocked the outer chambers. The sounds of plasma fire and alien war cries grew closer. Foster and his team were fighting a losing battle, engaged in brutal close-quarters combat with the Talarian boarding party. Energy readings from the Nova Catalyst spiked wildly. Timothy held his breath, praying that his gamble would pay off. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he watched the final seconds tick down. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the heart of the device. The light was so intense that Timothy instinctively threw his arm over his eyes. When he lowered it, he saw Talarian and human combatants alike staggering, momentarily disoriented by the burst. On the main view screen, Timothy watched in awe as the nearby star began to pulsate erratically. Its core destabilized at an unprecedented rate, tendrils of stellar matter lashing out into space. "It worked," he breathed, hardly daring to believe it. The effects spread rapidly through space. On the long-range sensors, Timothy saw Talarian ships losing power, drifting aimlessly as their systems failed. The central command node of the Talarian fleet winked out of existence, overwhelmed by the artificial supernova's energy signature. A cheer went up from the human defenders as the Talarian assault faltered. Without guidance from their command structure, the alien warriors fell into disarray. Foster and his team pressed their advantage, driving the invaders back. Timothy allowed himself a moment of elation before the reality of their situation set in. The command post was breaking apart, unable to withstand the tremendous energies being released by the destabilizing star. "All personnel, evacuate immediately." Colonel Hendrix's voice boomed over the facility-wide comms. "This is not a drill. Proceed to emergency extraction points now." Captain Cox's face appeared on a nearby screen. "Horizon moving into position for emergency extraction. Stand by for pickup." Timothy helped Takahashi to her feet. The chief engineer swayed, her face pale from radiation exposure. "We need to get you to medical," he said, supporting her weight as they moved towards the exit. They met Foster and his team in the corridor, the soldiers providing cover as they made their way to the extraction point. The UES Horizon swooped in, its docking bay open and ready to receive them. As they sprinted across the disintegrating landing pad, Timothy risked a glance back at the star. His blood ran cold as he realized the full extent of what they had unleashed. The artificial supernova was expanding far more rapidly than their models had predicted, threatening to engulf not just the Talarian fleet, but neighboring star systems as well. They tumbled into the Horizon's airlock just as the command post's structure finally gave way. The ship's engines roared to life, pushing them away from the expanding shockwave of the supernova. In the medical bay, Timothy watched helplessly as the medical team worked to stabilize Takahashi. The ship's doctor looked grim as he assessed her radiation exposure. On the bridge, Captain Cox pushed the Horizon's engines to their limits, racing against the spreading wave of destruction. Timothy stared at the sensor readings in horror, his mind blown as he grappled with the consequences of his actions. "What have I done?" he whispered, watching as the artificial supernova continued to grow, its effects reaching further than anyone had anticipated. As the Horizon sped towards Earth, Timothy knew that their victory against the Talarians would be short-lived. He had saved his homeworld, but at what cost? The future of the stars now hung in the balance, and he was responsible. With shaking hands, he pulled up the Nova Catalyst data on a nearby console. There had to be a way to contain this runaway reaction, to stop the destruction before it spread too far. As the ship hurtled through space, Timothy threw himself into the calculations, knowing that time was running out not just for humanity, but for countless worlds across the stars. Behind them, the artificial supernova continued to expand, a brilliant and terrible testament to the power humanity had unleashed upon the cosmos. Galaxy. Timothy's eyes remained fixed on the sensor readings, his mind racing to find a solution to the catastrophe he had unleashed. Captain Cox's voice crackled over the intercom. "All hands, prepare for atmospheric entry. We're approaching Earth's orbit." The Horizon shuddered as it plunged into the planet's atmosphere. Timothy gripped his console tightly, his fist clenched with tension. As the ship descended, he could see the sprawling metropolis of New Geneva through the view screen, its gleaming towers a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in space. Upon landing, Timothy and his team were immediately whisked away to the United Earth Government's Crisis Center. The room buzzed with frantic activity as officials and scientists pored over data streaming in from across the galaxy. Admiral Reeves, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair, approached Timothy. "Dr. Simpson, I hope you have some good news for us." Timothy took a deep breath. "Admiral, I've developed a potential containment strategy. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to stop the supernova from spreading further." He quickly outlined his plan for a network of energy-absorbing satellites. As he spoke, holographic displays flickered to life, showing the proposed barrier surrounding the expanding supernova. The room fell silent as Timothy finished his presentation. Admiral Reeves exchanged glances with other UEG officials before turning back to Timothy. "It's experimental and dangerous, but we're out of options. You have full authorization to proceed, Dr. Simpson." Over the next few days, Timothy worked tirelessly in a makeshift laboratory aboard the UES Horizon. The ship had been repurposed as a mobile command center for the containment operation. Engineers and scientists from across Earth joined his team, their expertise crucial in refining the satellite design. As they prepared for the mission, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The artificial supernova had already consumed 3 uninhabited star systems, and its expansion showed no signs of slowing. Alien civilizations were in an uproar, demanding explanations and action from Earth. Timothy's concentration was broken by a priority transmission. The holographic display showed the familiar features of Ambassador Krell, but the alien's usual stoic demeanor was replaced by hardly restrained fury. "Dr. Simpson," Krell's translator rendered his gravelly voice, "the Zarkonian Empire formally withdraws from our alliance with Earth. Your reckless actions have endangered the entire galaxy. We cannot associate with such an unstable species." Before Timothy could respond, the transmission cut off. He slumped in his chair, the weight of the galaxy's condemnation pressing down on him. Captain Cox entered the lab, her face grim. "We've just received word. A coalition of alien races, led by the Zendar Collective, has launched an attack on our outer colonies. They're calling it a preemptive strike to neutralize the Nova Catalyst threat." Timothy's blood ran cold. He had hoped to have more time, but now humanity was fighting a war on 2 fronts, against the expanding supernova and hostile alien forces. The UES Horizon, along with a hastily assembled fleet of construction ships, departed Earth the next day. As they approached the affected region of space, the crew fell silent. The view screens showed a terrifying sight: the artificial supernova, a roiling mass of energy that dwarfed anything humanity had ever encountered. Timothy coordinated the deployment of the energy-absorbing satellites from the Horizon's bridge. Construction drones swarmed out of the ships, carrying components and assembling the massive structures in space. The work was grueling and dangerous. Several drones were lost to sudden energy surges from the supernova. Timothy watched the casualties mount with a heavy heart, knowing that each lost drone represented irreplaceable time and resources. As the satellite network slowly took shape, Timothy noticed something strange in the energy readings. He zoomed in on the data, his eyes widening as he realized the implications. "Captain Cox," he called out, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "The supernova's energy signature. It's revealing previously unknown properties of space-time. This could revolutionize our understanding of faster-than-light travel and energy production." Cox frowned. "That's fascinating, Doctor, but how does it help us right now?" Timothy's mind raced. It might be the key to our survival. If we can harness this energy instead of just containing it, we could potentially develop defenses against the alien coalition. He quickly outlined a modified plan, one that would not only contain the supernova, but also tap into its immense power. It was risky. One miscalculation could accelerate the supernova's expansion instead of controlling it. As Timothy worked on the new calculations, reports came in of the alien coalition breaking through Earth's outer defenses. Admiral Reeves's face appeared on the main view screen, her expression grim. "Dr. Simpson, we're running out of time. Whatever you're planning, do it now. Earth's forces can't hold out much longer." Timothy looked at the unfinished satellite network, then at the swirling chaos of the supernova. He knew that what he was about to attempt could either save humanity or condemn the entire galaxy to destruction. With a deep breath, he gave the order to reconfigure the satellites. As the drones began their work, alarms blared throughout the ship. The supernova's energy levels were spiking, threatening to overwhelm the partially completed network. Timothy's fingers flew over the controls, making split-second adjustments to compensate for the energy surges. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as he raced against time, trying to harness the very force that threatened to destroy them all. Timothy's fingers danced across the control panel, his eyes darting between readouts as he made split-second adjustments to the satellite network. The supernova's energy signature pulsed erratically, threatening to overwhelm their defenses at any moment. "Reconfiguring energy absorption parameters," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Captain Cox, I need all available power diverted to the main deflector array." The captain nodded, relaying the order to her crew. The ship hummed as energy surged through its systems, feeding into the makeshift device that Timothy had dubbed the Nova Channeler. As the satellites realigned, the view screen lit up with a dazzling display of light and color. The supernova's energy began to coalesce, drawn inexorably towards the Nova Channeler. Timothy watched in awe as the destructive force was slowly tamed, channeled into a controllable beam. "It's working," he breathed, allowing himself a moment of cautious optimism. His elation was short-lived. Admiral Reeves's face appeared on the comm screen, her expression grim. "Dr. Simpson, we're out of time. Earth's outer defenses have fallen. The alien coalition is pushing into the solar system." Timothy's heart made. He knew the stakes couldn't be higher. "Understood, Admiral. We're proceeding with the plan." As Timothy and his team worked feverishly to stabilize the Nova Channeler, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human colonies in the outer systems were going dark, one by one, overwhelmed by the advancing alien forces. The construction of the Nova Channeler proved to be a Herculean task. Extreme radiation levels and gravitational distortions near the supernova made every movement treacherous. Timothy watched helplessly as a construction ship strayed too close to an energy surge, its hull crumpling like paper before it vanished in a flash of light. "We can't afford to lose any more ships," he muttered, adjusting the safety protocols. "Tighten the perimeter. No one goes beyond the marked zone." As if the situation wasn't dire enough, long-range sensors picked up a new threat. A massive fleet was approaching from the direction of former Talarian space. Captain Cox's voice was tense as she reported, Dr. Simpson, we're detecting Talarian energy signatures. It looks like they've regrouped under a new leader. Timothy's mind raced. The Talarians were supposed to have been defeated by the initial supernova. Their resurgence complicated an already impossible situation. They're targeting the construction site, an ensign called out. Multiple hostile ships on approach vector. Timothy made a split-second decision. Captain Cox, I'm taking command of the defense fleet. We need to protect the Nova Channeler at all costs. He quickly outlined a daring strategy, using his knowledge of astrophysics to turn the supernova's gravitational effects to their advantage. Human ships dance through the treacherous space, using the gravitic eddies to outmaneuver the larger, less agile Talarian vessels. As the battle raged around them, Timothy received an urgent communication from the medical bay. Chief Engineer Takahashi's face appeared on the screen, her complexion still pale from radiation exposure. "Dr. Simpson, I've made a breakthrough," she said, her voice weak but determined. "I can increase the Nova Channeler's efficiency by 300%, but it will make the device dangerously unstable." Timothy weighed the risks. Earth was running out of time, and they needed every advantage they could get. "Do it," he ordered. "We'll deal with the instability." As Takahashi implemented her modifications, alarms blared throughout the ship. The Nova Channeler's energy readings spiked dramatically, the device pulsing with barely held back power. Suddenly, a priority transmission cut through the chaos. Admiral Reeves appeared on the main view screen, her face ashen. "The Zendar fleet has broken through. They're in the solar system, Dr. Simpson. The UEG is considering surrender." Timothy felt the weight of countless lives pressing down on him. He knew what he had to do. "No surrender," he said firmly. "We're activating the Nova Channeler now." With a deep breath, Timothy initiated the activation sequence. The massive device hummed to life, drawing in the supernova's energy at an astonishing rate. The channeled power formed a colossal beam visible across light years. "Target the Zendar fleet," Timothy ordered, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he was about to do. The beam lanced out, crossing the vast distance to Earth in an instant. It struck the Zendar ships with devastating effect, cutting through their advanced shields and hull armor as if they were nothing. In seconds, a significant portion of the alien fleet was reduced to drifting debris. The effect on the battlefield was immediate. The remaining coalition forces, witnessing the awesome destructive power of the Nova Channeler, began a panicked retreat. Timothy allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. Warning indicators flashed across his console as the Nova Channeler's instability increased exponentially. "We can't shut it down," he realized with growing horror. "The energy buildup is too great. If we try to deactivate it now, the resulting explosion could destroy half the galaxy." As Timothy grappled with this new crisis, Admiral Reeves's voice came through once more. "Dr. Simpson, the Talarians have regrouped. They're launching a renewed offensive. You need to target them with the Nova Channeler." Timothy froze, the implications of the order hitting him like a physical blow. Using the device against the Zendar had been an act of desperate self-defense, but this would be different. He looked at the tactical display showing the Talarian fleet's position. One shot from the Nova Channeler would annihilate them completely. It would end the threat to Earth instantly, possibly securing humanity's dominance in the galaxy for generations to come. But at what cost? The loss of life would be staggering, and using such a weapon offensively could brand humanity as tyrants or monsters in the eyes of the galactic community. As Timothy stood paralyzed by indecision, the Nova Channeler's instability reached critical levels. Alarms blared throughout the ship, warning of imminent catastrophic failure. Timothy's hand hovered over the targeting controls. The fate of Earth, of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy hung on his next action. The weight of this moment, the responsibility of this choice, pressed down on him with almost physical force. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Whatever he decided, he knew the consequences would echo across the stars for centuries to come. With the Nova Channeler on the brink of destruction and threats closing in from all sides, Timothy prepared to make the most important decision of his life. Timothy's hand moved away from the targeting controls. He couldn't do it. He couldn't condemn an entire civilization to destruction, even if it meant saving Earth. There had to be another way. "Recalculating trajectory," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We're not targeting the Talarian fleet. We're going to create a barrier." Captain Cox's eyes widened. A barrier? How? Timothy's fingers flew across the console, inputting new coordinates. "We'll direct the beam into empty space between Earth and the Talarian forces. The energy discharge should create a massive vortex of charged particles and radiation. It won't destroy them, but it will stop their advance." As the Nova Channeler's instability reached critical levels, Timothy initiated the energy release. The beam lanced out, striking a point in the void between Earth and the approaching armada. The effect was immediate and awe-inspiring. A swirling maelstrom of energy erupted in space, expanding rapidly to form a vast, impenetrable wall. On the tactical display, Timothy watched as the Talarian fleet's advance ground to a halt, unable to penetrate the newly formed barrier. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the Nova Channeler's systems began to overload. Timothy knew they were out of time. "Initiate emergency evacuation," he ordered, his voice cutting through the cacophony of warnings. "All non-essential personnel, abandon ship immediately." As crew members rushed to the escape pods, Timothy turned to Captain Cox. "I need a skeleton crew to manage the device's final moments. Any volunteers stay at their own risk." A handful of officers remained at their stations, commitment etched on their faces. Timothy nodded gratefully to each of them. The next few minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Timothy's hands danced across the controls, trying to contain the Nova Channeler's growing instability, but it was a losing battle. "It's going to implode," he realized aloud. "Brace for impact." The Nova Channeler collapsed in on itself, forming a microsingularity that swallowed the remnants of the artificial supernova. The resulting shockwave rocked the ship, throwing Timothy and the remaining crew to the floor. As he pulled himself up, Timothy noticed something strange on the sensors. The implosion had created a ripple effect in space-time, spreading outward at an impossible speed. "What's happening?" Captain Cox asked, her voice tense. Timothy stared at the readings in disbelief. "It's disrupting faster-than-light travel and communications. The effect is spreading across the entire region." The implications hit him like a physical blow. Without FTL capabilities, the alien coalition's forces would be isolated, unable to coordinate their attacks. It was an unexpected reprieve, but one that came with its own set of challenges. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, confirming the widespread disruption, Admiral Reeves's face appeared on the main view screen. "Dr. Simpson, what the hell just happened?" she demanded. Timothy quickly explained the situation, watching as the Admiral's expression shifted from confusion to calculated interest. "This changes everything," Reeves mused. "We need to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm initiating a diplomatic offensive." The Admiral outlined her plan to broadcast a message to all alien races, proposing an emergency summit. Timothy listened intently, his mind already racing ahead to the potential consequences of this move. As the broadcast went out, Timothy turned his attention to the data from the Nova Channeler's final moments. What he discovered left him breathless. "Captain," he called out, excitement creeping into his voice. "The implosion left behind a network of subspace filaments. They're like invisible corridors in space. This could revolutionize interstellar travel and communication." The implications were staggering. Humanity now held the key to a potential new era of galactic exploration and commerce. But with great power came great responsibility and great danger. As news of the discovery spread, Timothy found himself at the center of a growing political storm. General Victor Kroger, a hawkish member of the United Earth government, began pushing for the weaponization of the subspace filament network. "We have a chance to establish human dominance in the galaxy," Kroger argued during a tense UEG meeting. "We'd be fools not to take it." Timothy listened to the general's rhetoric with growing unease. He knew that this path would only lead to more conflict, more destruction. Stepping up to the podium, he made his case for a different approach. "We have an opportunity here," Timothy began, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Not for dominance, but for cooperation. By sharing this technology and working with other species, we can ensure long-term peace and prosperity for Earth and the entire galaxy." His words resonated with many, but the debate was not nearly finished. As Timothy left the chamber, he was approached by Admiral Reeves. "We need you to develop a method to safely stabilize and control the subspace filament network," she said without preamble. "It's going to be our key bargaining chip at the summit." Timothy nodded, his mind already whirring with possibilities. "I'll need a team, the best minds we have, and—" He paused, knowing his next words might be controversial. "We should include alien scientists as well. Their perspectives could be invaluable." To his surprise, Reeves agreed. Within days, Timothy found himself leading a diverse team of human and alien scientists, including some former adversaries. The work was challenging but exhilarating. As they made progress, however, tensions on Earth continued to rise. General Kroger's faction gained support, fueled by fear and a desire for retribution. Pro-war protests erupted in major cities, while others demonstrated in favor of peace and cooperation. Timothy tried to stay focused on his work, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He knew that their success or failure could determine the course of human history. Late one night, as Timothy was poring over some particularly complex calculations, alarms began blaring throughout the research facility. Security feeds showed armed intruders forcing their way inside. Saboteurs, Timothy realized with a jolt. He quickly initiated emergency protocols, securing their most sensitive data. As the sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors, Timothy found himself fighting alongside his alien colleagues, defending their work against the attackers. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. Former enemies now united against a common threat. In the aftermath of the attack, as the UEG erupted into chaos and alien representatives threatened to withdraw from the upcoming summit, Timothy knew that the real battle was just beginning. The future of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, would depend not just on the technology they developed, but on their ability to choose cooperation over conflict. As he surveyed the damaged lab, Timothy's mind raced with possibilities. They had made a breakthrough in controlling the subspace filaments, but now they faced a new challenge: convincing both humanity and the galactic community to use this power responsibly. The summit loomed on the horizon, a crucible that would test not just their scientific acumen, but their diplomatic skills and moral fortitude as well. Well, Timothy took a deep breath, his mind racing with the enormity of the situation. The attack on the research facility had made one thing clear: they couldn't afford to wait any longer. It was time to take action. "We need to address everyone," Timothy announced to his team, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Not just the UEG, but the alien representatives as well. We have to broadcast our message to the entire galaxy." Captain Cox nodded, her expression grim. "How do you propose we do that? The communications networks are in disarray." "The Central Communications Hub in Geneva?" Timothy replied, already moving towards the exit. "It's our best shot at reaching everyone simultaneously." As they made their way through the streets of Geneva, the city was a maelstrom of unrest. Protesters clashed with security forces, their angry shouts filling the air. Timothy and his team, including several alien scientists, had to navigate carefully to avoid being caught in the crossfire. "Look out!" shouted Dr. Kurix, a Talarian xenobiologist, as a group of anti-alien extremists rounded the corner. The team ducked into an alley, pressing themselves against the wall as the mob passed by. Timothy's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. They couldn't afford to fail now. As they approached the communications hub, they found it under siege. A group of extremists had taken control of the building, their weapons trained on the entrance. "We'll never get in there," muttered Chief Engineer Takahashi, her face pale from her recent injuries. Just then, a familiar voice crackled over their comms. Dr. Simpson, this is Lieutenant Foster. My team and I are in position to retake the hub. On your signal, we'll move in. Timothy hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. Then he nodded. Do it, Lieutenant. We'll follow you in. What followed was a blur of action. Foster's team struck with precision, catching the extremists off guard. Timothy and his colleagues seized the opportunity, racing into the building amid the chaos. Inside, they found the broadcast equipment largely intact. Takahashi immediately set to work, her fingers flying over the controls despite her injuries. We don't have much time, she warned, her eyes never leaving the screen. Kroger's people will try to cut us off as soon as they realize what we're doing. Timothy nodded, taking his place in front of the camera. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The fate of humanity, of the entire galaxy, rested on what he was about to say. As the red light blinked on, indicating they were live, Timothy began to speak. His voice was clear and unwavering, carrying across the airwaves and into the void of space. People of Earth, representatives of our galactic neighbors, I come to you today with a message of hope, he began. The technology we've developed, the subspace filament network, has the potential to change everything, not just for humanity, but for all sentient species. As Timothy spoke, he could see Takahashi in his peripheral vision, her face a mask of concentration as she fought to keep the broadcast alive. On a nearby screen, he could see reports coming in from across the galaxy as faster-than-light communications gradually returned. This network isn't just a means of travel or communication, Timothy continued. It's a bridge between civilizations, a way for us to come together, to share knowledge and resources on an unprecedented scale. He paused, taking a moment to let his words sink in. Then he dropped the bombshell. That's why I'm proposing that we, humanity, do not seek to control this technology. Instead, we should create a multi-species council to oversee its development and implementation. A council where every voice is heard, where we work together for the betterment of all. The response was immediate. Across Earth, pro-war protesters lowered their weapons, their angry shouts turning to murmurs of discussion. In space, alien ships that had been poised for attack held their positions, their commanders listening intently to Timothy's words. As Timothy continued to outline his vision for galactic cooperation, the atmosphere began to shift. The fear and anger that had dominated recent events began to give way to something else. Hope. Suddenly, alarms blared through the communication hub. General Kroger's forces were making their move. We're losing the feed, Takahashi shouted, her hands a blur over the controls. Timothy pressed on, speaking faster now. We stand at a crossroads. We can choose fear and conflict, or we can choose cooperation and progress. The decision is ours to make, here and now. As he finished speaking, the broadcast cut out. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Then, reports began flooding in from across the planet and beyond. Alien leaders were responding to the call for cooperation. Public opinion on Earth was shifting rapidly. And in orbit, Admiral Reeves's loyalist forces were moving to intercept Kroger's attempted coup. Timothy slumped in his chair, exhausted but relieved. They had done it. They had gotten the message out. What now? Asked Dr. Crix, his alien features unreadable. Timothy stood up, a new purpose in his eyes. Now, he said, we prepare for the summit. Our work is just beginning. As they left the communications hub, stepping out into a city that was already changing, Timothy knew that the road ahead would be challenging. But for the first time in a long while, he felt genuinely optimistic about the future. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. And Timothy Simpson, the man who had almost destroyed everything, was now at the forefront of a movement that could bring about an era of unprecedented peace and discovery.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.